Well, this is the Tim Mumbauer. So let's have a word of prayer. God, we thank you for Tim. We thank you for the message that you've laid on his heart. God, we pray that you calm his nerves and just help him to deliver what you have for us to hear in your name. Amen.
Thank you. I have to admit, I was a little nervous when you came up and put on your jacket, and I thought, sheesh, all I wore was a button-down short sleeve shirt. Give me a moment to play with this. Well, it might take me more than a moment. Oh, it's always fun, isn't it? So this is the year that we've been telling stories here at church, and I kept waiting for them to ask me to tell a story and thinking about all the different stories that I could tell, and I never got the opportunity. Nobody's asked me to share my story, so when they asked me to preach, I thought, well, I'll take care of that. I'll just tell my story. I'll do it now. So you guys get to hear one of my Trissell's stories. And I could tell a lot. I have been here a while. We moved down from Eastern Pennsylvania in 1987. So I've been part of the congregation since I was 9. And if we can get this going, I'll jump into the rest of what we're going to do. Just hit slideshow and that should do it. It's going to be a long message. So if you are not related, okay, if you're related, you're exempt from this. If you know who this is, raise your hand. Or you can't see it. Interesting. Okay, it's coming. Now, if you're related, you're exempt. If you know who this is, raise your hand. Okay. I'm going to talk about them, but not quite yet. I want to read, this is our passage from Philippians this morning. It says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion. It doesn't say if you've been incredibly blessed. It doesn't say if you're living on easy street. It doesn't say if you feel intimately connected with all of those around you spiritually. It says if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, any comfort from his love, any common sharing of the Spirit, any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made into human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It tells us to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. That is a pretty tall order. At least I have found that to be a pretty tall order. For me, particularly that selfish ambition. It's pretty hard. It's a good challenge for us. I want you to think for a little bit. When we think about giving to others who are in need, what specific things do we have that we could share? And I don't mean, well, I could loan somebody my car, or I could, but like, larger ideas. What do we possess? What do we have that we could share with others? Take a moment, turn to your neighbor. What are things that that we can share, that we can give to those who are in need? Turn to your neighbor and talk. Anybody come up with anything? Time. Money. Say again. Christ. Cards. Encouragement. Food. Listening. Friendship. There's my list. Maybe if we finagle a little bit, we can say that everything, that I got everything you said. Not exactly. Our time, our energy, our encouragement, our money, our possessions, our knowledge, our faith, our love. And I'm sure there are other things. I want you to think about that list. And what up there is easiest for you to give? I'm not going to make you shout this out, but what is easiest on that list for you to give? Because I think it varies for different ones of us. What's the hardest for you to give up there? Kim, what's the hardest for me to give? I haven't asked her this. Time. It's the hardest one for me. Or my faith. That can be a challenge. What is it that keeps us from sharing these things, all of these things, not just the easy ones, but what is it that keeps us from sharing all of these things with those around us in the ways that we should? Not being confident.
I shouldn't say it, but one of the things I find the hardest, when you know the scripture and what it says, and you deal with somebody as a professor at college or seminary, or when you'd like to say something to somebody that knows so much more than you're supposed to know. It's hard to minister.
Okay.
Is that foolish?
Maybe it's foolish, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. Somebody else?
Self-centeredness.
Yeah. For me, it comes back, that selfish ambition, that vain conceit can really get in my way of sharing those things. And sometimes it is a confidence thing, right? I don't feel adequate. I don't feel worthy, or I don't feel like I have what somebody needs. But a lot of times I do, and I don't want to go to the trouble, or I don't want to make the sacrifice, or I'd rather have that for myself. But we're called to do things not out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, valuing others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And that probably works pretty well if everybody's on that page, right? But because of that selfish ambition, we sometimes keep score, right? And I've given this and I've done this, and what has he done and what has she done? The older I've gotten, the more I've realized how much people do that I am not aware of. Like the better I get to know each of you in this congregation, I find things that you do behind the scenes that I was simply not aware of. The entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you're doing that, that selfish ambition And that vain conceit can't get in the way very much, can they? Because my selfishness, my love for myself isn't any greater or less than it is for you. Now that's, again, an incredible challenge. I want to go back to these folks, and I'm going to tell my story. That's Johnny and Kathleen Geil. This is long before I knew them. This is the way I knew them. And the first time we were at Trissell's, we had moved here in '87. We were visiting churches. We came for Sunday school, went down, they showed us to the Sunday school rooms, went downstairs, and nobody was there. It was me in a room by myself, and I guess they were running a little late. Kathleen came in, and it was me and Kathleen for Sunday school that very first Sunday that I was here. That was my very first introduction to them. It wasn't long after that that we were invited over for dinner at their house. It was the family. Again, I would have been 9 or maybe 10 by that point, because I turned 10 soon after we moved. But we were over at their house for dinner. That was the first time that I met Mel. I'm sure she doesn't remember, but they came. We were there at dinner. John was not part of dinner. They came past. John said something smart to Mel. She had gloves in her hand. She smacked him on the rear, and out the door they went. And Kathleen turned to the family there at the table and said, "We think she might be the one." That next summer, when Highland approached, I was invited to go back with them, because I don't think our family was attending, but I was invited to go back and stay in Walnut Cabin with the Geils. That was the first of many times that I spent back at Highland with the Geils. I learned to play rook, ate, I can't tell you how many breakfasts around that campfire. I remember it was a month after that or so, I guess Kathleen enjoyed taking pictures, because she brought in this picture and right back there gave it to Mom. It was me climbing into the bunk that weekend. And of course I'm climbing into the bunk and she's taking the picture, and the most prominent thing is my rear. And I was mortified. She thought it was the funniest thing. It was sometime in that first year, I would say, maybe first year and a half, they found out that, again, I don't know, 11, 12, something like that, 10, 11, 12. They found out that I enjoyed going to auctions with Dad, and they loved going to the old schoolhouse auction in Harrisonburg. And so they talked to us and asked if I wanted to go along. And they came over and picked me up, and Johnny and Kathleen and I went to the LNS diner, and I had sausage and sauerkraut. And then we went to the Green Valley, or not the Green Valley, we went to the old schoolhouse auction, and I bought a calf bucket. It was before we were even raising calves, but I bought a calf bucket. It was the first time I'd signed up for a number, first time I'd bid on anything. And they let me handle all that on my own. Sometime in there, and I don't know the timing exactly, Johnny had Dad over, and I guess he had found out Dad was a mechanic, and Dad started giving him some advice or working on some things. And then Dad was in need of a car, and Johnny had Dad over, and they fixed up an old Volkswagen Scirocco that had been wrecked. And I was young, and I was there to help, but I did more exploring in the junk that was around. It was the greatest thing ever as a whatever 12, 13-year-old kid. The old wrecked cars, and was it an old crawler that was in the shop, an old dozer in the shop? There was just really cool stuff, motorcycles, motor homes. And so they worked, and I explored. I don't know if I was supposed to or not, but I did. That was part of the generosity that I saw from them. It was an annual thing that there was a pig and corn roast. And it was a pig and corn roast that was the family, the church, their friends, and the community. It was a big to-do, and they had everybody and fed everybody, and it was just a big time of fellowship every year. Kathleen was particularly dedicated to the relief sale. That was a big part of what she did. I think the only time I ever rode with her was to the relief sale. I'm not sure what the occasion was. It was terrifying. It really was. She picked me up and took me to something, and that was the last time I ever accepted a ride from her. Loved her dearly, but whoo. I remember Johnny was an usher forever. I think he was probably an usher in the church the whole time I knew him. We used to have Sunday evening hymn sings, and it might have been everybody through the door, but every time I came through the door, he asked me if I had a bucket to carry that tune in, and then he laughed, that laugh of his, which came from his belly and infected everybody else. There was when I was a senior in high school, Johnny called the house and asked if I would come over. He had something he wanted to talk to me about. And so, okay, sure, we set up a time, hopped in the car, went over, and he took me out in back of the barn, and he showed me this would have been 1995, 95, 96. He showed me this old wrecked car that he had. And he asked if I wanted to help him fix that up. He thought that would make a good car for me. I was getting ready to go off to college. I would need a car of my own. I would need some transportation, and I agreed. So we spent a good bit of time together working on that car. It was hitting the left front corner, and so we had to take the hood and the bumper and the fender and the grill and all that stuff off and get into the inner structure and cut that out. And so I spent a good number of evenings. I was often invited in for dinner. When we'd gotten it all disassembled, and we cut out all the bad, and we went down to another parts car and cut off the chunk that we needed, and took it up, lined everything up, trimmed everything, clamped it all together with vice grips, right? So this has no bumper, no hood, no fender. The inner structure and the radiator support is clamped with vice grips, and he says he doesn't really have a welder that welds that real good, but there's a guy across the road's got one. And so he says, get in. And I was like, in the car? And he's like, yeah, and so we hop in the car and headed over to Steve Lance's. I don't think he might have slowed down when we got to 42, but I don't think really. I think he just made sure nobody was coming. I thought for sure we were going to get arrested because this car is being held together with vice grips and half of it's missing. Drove it across, got it welded up, took it back, finished the body work that we were going to do. I think Johnny Geil would tell you that he did 5 and 55 body work, and that was a 5-second glance at 55 miles an hour. It wasn't meticulous, but he got it done. Even then I struggled a little bit with that. I had to sneak back in and do some sanding at times that he didn't realize I was there. so I could sleep at night, but we got it done. He painted the car. I went over, filled out, he said, oh, he knows all about getting it inspected and doing all that paperwork. So he had me over and I signed all the papers. He had the inspector in, and it was all done. And he called me and I went over and I had been figuring, okay, what he told me he paid for the car, and then figuring out what paint cost and what the inspection cost, and I was going to need to license it and all that sort of stuff. And I had this all figured up, and I figured I had enough in my checking account, and I took my checkbook over there to pick up the car. And he said, no, this is for you. And I said, well, it had license plates on it. It was inspected. It was ready to go. And I said, no, that's not the deal. And he said, no, he said, you work hard. You're a good guy. He said, you're getting ready to go to school. You need a car. This is our gift to you. And the thing is, it's not like I was some sort of grandson that they never had. They have plenty of grandsons who are great guys. They saw a need, and they chose to not just help me fill that need, but to go above and beyond, to give to me, to help me be able to help myself. Now, I know they gave me a car, right? Like, that's a pretty big deal. Hey, some people from church are going to give you a car, right? Now, it was not perfect. All right. It was 15 years old when you went around a left-hand turn. I don't know what the oil sump, but something went ticky, 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 and then it would go back away, right? About once a week, you'd be driving along, it would just die. You just had to reach down and grab all the fuses and just do this, and it would start back up, and down the road you'd go. I took it to Georgia multiple times. I can't tell you how many miles on that car. But they gave me more than a car. Johnny gave me more than a car. He shared his time. He shared his money. He shared his knowledge and his skill. And if you know me, that's something that I still do with the help of others who continue to train me. But it wasn't just, here's somebody who has a need and we're going to write him that check, right, Nelson? Not just going to write him that check and do the easy part. It was multiple things from that list of things that we can do for others. It wasn't done because we're going to help him and feel good about ourselves and move on. It's we're going to help him and we're going to help him grow. I was not the only one that Johnny Geil did that for. He did it for Dad. He did it for me. And I know he did it for many others. And the thing is, there were people at this church, and I don't mean this as a criticism. I really, really don't. But there were people at this church who had more than they did. Right? Loretta talked a couple of months ago about growing up and how poor they were. And I think by this time in life, things were a little more stable financially for them, and they were able to do that. But you're not talking about people who were millionaires. And you think about people who grew up so poor. How many people, we hear these stories about people who grew up in the Depression and how they hold so tightly because they never had. One of the things that impresses me is that Johnny and Kathleen had to hold so tightly to get by for all those years. And then when they had, they gave. Knowing what it's like to want, knowing what it's like to need, and still being able to give and give generously is what we are called to do. The last time I saw Kathleen, John and I had gone down to Bedford to look at wrecked cars. And we'd ridden together. I'd parked. He'd met me over at the farm. I think we went after school. We got back late in the evening. And it was John and me and Kathleen. And she said, I've got dinner inside. She said, come on in and eat. And John said, no, I got to get home. Got to get home to the kids. And he left. And Kathleen begged a little bit more, and it didn't take a lot because she was offering food. And I went in, and it wasn't like she was in the middle of dinner and it was all set up, right? She pulled dinner back out, it was sausage and sauerkraut. She pulled it back out and she fried it up and she fed me dinner. And then it was a week or two later that she, actually, I think it was within a week maybe, that she had passed. And I remember thinking then, and I still think now, how fitting that was, that the last act that I experienced from her was that generosity and that gift and that hospitality and that sharing. And that embodied who they were to me. I called this talk Just Another Story. Not to downplay what they meant to me or what they meant to others or who they were, but because, well, really two reasons. One, I could tell a lot of stories about a lot of people. I could tell my Carl Showalter story. I could tell my J. Ward Shanks stories. I could tell my Norman Yutzi stories. I could tell my Mark and Dorothy stories. I could tell a lot of stories about a lot of people who helped raise me and support me and my family through a lot of years. I was tempted to tell my Norval and Doris Trumbo stories. I could pick from a lot. Their story, Johnny and Kathleen Geil's story, my story of them is a good story, but it's just one of many that I could tell. But there's another reason that I called this talk Just Another Story, and that is because I want us to be motivated to make sure that others can continue to tell stories like this. I want us to want to impact those around us in ways that they will have stories to tell, not to build us up, but as ways of encouragement. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. How do we go about this, right? What do we do to make sure that our mindset is one that is ready to give this way? Number one, count your blessings. Stop and do that. Really do that. Go back to that list. It's not just those physical possessions. It's not just the money you have in the bank. Count your blessings. Think about all the good gifts that you have been given. Recognize the source of those blessings, right? Those blessings come from God. I work hard. I save. But I don't earn what I have. Everything we have is a gift from God. Recognize the source of those blessings. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God, our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. Remember that this life is temporary. You hear it all the time. You can't take it with you, and you can't. Doesn't mean you don't need some of it, but you can't take it with you. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things that are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Remember that those blessings are on loan. Those things that we have are just ours for a short time. They really are. That money in the bank, right? That Porsche in the yard. Someday, we'll all be part of that cemetery walk. And that's okay. The heavens are yours. The earth also is yours. The world and all it contains. You have founded them. This is one that I take from Johnny and Kathleen. Get over the world's expectations. I've heard Dave say that one of the things, I can't remember how you said it, Dave, but that we need to worry a little bit less about the condition of our house when we invite people over, right? That we need to get over this thing that our lives need to appear perfect in order to share them with others, right? No offense intended. Johnny and Kathleen's shop and yard was a mess, right? It was full of junk cars, which I thought was great. But there are a lot of folks who might have lifted their noses at that. We weren't concerned about that. And I can't tell you, I don't remember the house being dirty or whatever, but I can guarantee you Kathleen hadn't cleaned particularly before inviting me in that last time. She just invited me in because that was more important. Inviting me in, having me be a part, sharing dinner with me was more important than the impression that she thought I may or may not have of how she kept her kitchen, right? That's having that priority straight. Sometimes we need to get over the world's expectations and look to what God expects of us. And then, of course, we need to act. We need to do. In order to share those blessings, we've got to take the time. We've got to use the energy. We've got to spend the money to actually act, to share God's blessings with others. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and be well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? Well, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Now, make no mistake, we are saved by grace through faith. But being saved requires us to then follow. And following requires action. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I'm going to argue that Johnny and Kathleen and so many others who've gone before, so many others who've sat in these pews, so many of you who continue to sit in these pews right now, have built up that treasure within each other. We've built up that treasure. Many of you have built up that treasure within me. That's where your heart is. That's where Johnny and Kathleen's heart was. I've felt that. I've experienced that. And my challenge to you today is that we all help others experience our treasure, our love. Not only are we called to do that, but I think we can all examine our hearts and our experiences and recognize that we have been blessed by others who have chosen to do that. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the gifts that you have given us, the gifts that you have given to those who have gone before and that they have chosen to share with us. We recognize that all good things come from you. And we ask that you would put on our hearts ways to share those things, that it not be writing a check and moving on, but that you would help us to find ways in which we should invest ourselves as we seek to act out you. In your name, amen.